much apologies to everyone for the slight delay. It's going to be a big night. We have incredible guests who are going to talk to you about what the big ugly Republican bill does. Amongst other things, let's be honest, it's going to cut 760 billion out of Medicaid. It's going to cut 500 billion out of Medicare, 250 billion from the Affordable Care Act, 250 billion from nutrition programs, especially for kids in our nation. It's going to lay off 83,000 people at the VA, providing healthcare service for our vets, and it's all for the big billionaire tax cut. Okay, so it's immoral. It's making selfishness our government policy, for the wealthiest in our society, taking the first wealth, health, away from ordinary families in order to just increase the wealth of the wealthiest in our society. So we thank all of you for joining us. We're going to have an incredible group of speakers in Shope from Protect Our Care, Salam Badi from Food Research and Action Center, Zab Martinez from AFSCME, Council 32, Michael Linden from Families Over Billionaires, and Joe Radosevich from the Center for American Progress. Apologies to you, Joe. I'll get it right the next time. But first, we're going to kick it off with an incredible warrior, incredible advocate for taking care of every family in our country, and not just the wealthiest. The great Congresswoman Summer Lee from the state of Pennsylvania. Welcome, Congresswoman.
Senator, thanks again, always, of course, just for your tireless advocacy, for leading us, for bringing us together. I know it feels like maybe just intuitive, but the reality is that there are not many spaces for us to come together to talk through what's happening, to plan, to strategize, and also to remind people that we do still have power in the work that we do in each of our individual spaces. So thank you for having me here. I'm Summer Lee. I am Congresswoman. I represent Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, Western PA, a town that is going to, in a region, frankly, that is going to be hit quite hard by all of the proposed cuts that we see in this big bad bill. So for us and for this moment, I'm grateful for the opportunity to just come and talk, but also to kind of lift up a lot of the work that other people are going to do. So I don't even want to, and we don't need to mince too many words about what we're experiencing, right? And the urgency of this moment. I think that we all really, really understand it. We know the Republican Party loves to claim that they're, America first and America first party, but the reality is that it is clear as day. They are not only leaving behind millions and millions of people in this reconciliation bill, they're actively harming our people in this budget process and every other process that they've been undergoing since January 20th. Republicans, to just put it out first, the Republicans are going to make the largest cuts to Medicaid in American history. And if we don't protect Medicaid right now while it's over in the Senate, we know that it's going to be catastrophic. It's like over 80 million people in our country. These are elderly folks. These are disabled adults and children, postmortem mothers, while we are in the midst of one of the greatest maternal mortality crises that we've seen and that we are seeing in what we consider the developed world. Children, infants, these are Democrats, Republicans, rural, urban, and suburban. These are Americans from all over this country in all walks of life who rely on Medicaid as the primary program, providing them comprehensive health coverage. Earlier this year, my office heard from a daughter, her elderly mother, who's in a nursing home. She needs consistent care. Her mom's Social Security was less than $1,200 a month, but the nursing home costs over $7,000. $7,000. The Republican cuts to Medicaid go through, this elder, right, this mother will be forced out of her home. She's not going to be able to get the care that she needs anymore. If she quits her job, she can maybe care for her mother full time, but she can't afford to do that, and she can't and still be able to put food on the table. She doesn't know what to do. we know this isn't just a tragedy for this individual family. This is the entire nursing home that could be shut down because of these cuts. Medicaid pays more than 60% of nursing home residents. If Medicaid's slashed, many of these homes are not going to be able to survive, and they're going to be forced to close. And there are so many more stories like this. I wouldn't be surprised if folks on this call today stand to lose their health care, or a family member or someone who they know would be deeply impacted. In this budget bill, Republicans are also, as we know, making drastic cuts to food assistance like SNAP at a time when people are struggling more than ever to afford their basic groceries. SNAP is a lifeline for families across this country, and 2 million people in Pennsylvania, my home state, rely on SNAP benefits. Trump is calling this the big, beautiful bill, which, aside from it being an incredibly ridiculous thing to actually brand your bill as, we know that there is nothing at all beautiful about forcing families to choose between taking their kids to the doctors or feeding them. The reality is that this bill is not just egregious, it is horrific, it is horrifying, and any member who votes for this cannot pretend to care about the health or the well-being of the people that they serve. They're more, and we have to call this out, that they are more concerned about answering to billionaires and the CEOs and the lobbyists who line their pockets than they are making sure that we keep people in our districts alive, that we keep them healthy, that we keep them secure. That is just the harsh reality of what this reconciliation bill does. So we have to make sure that this bill never makes it to the president's desk. I always say that the power of the people is greater than the people of power. And it's true, but it is really only if we choose to use it. And we all have to recognize and embrace that we do have the power right now. We still have power to pressure, to pull up on our senators. Thank you, Senator Markey, for volunteering yourself for that endeavor. We have to put that pressure on them. We have to let them know and remind ourselves that it takes 3 Republicans to block this bill from passing. We have to do this. We have to remind Republicans who they actually serve. Right now, they're trying to figure out if they're more afraid of Donald Trump or Elon Musk, or if they're more afraid of you. And we need to remind them that they need to be more afraid of us. We, the people who they serve, not the billionaires, not the corporate profiteers, not the oligarchs in the White House. We deserve so much better than what they're proposing, what they're pushing. You deserve so much better than what your government is trying to push on the American people. So I promise and I vow to continue to be in this fight for Congress to ensure that your rights, our health care, our food assistance, our dignity is protected. We need each of all of us, each and every one of us, to be tapped in right now. So thank you for coming tonight. Thank you for all the ways in which you are educating this teaching. You're going to take it, you're going to give it to other people, you're going to share it with your advocacy groups, and we're not going to be discouraged. Because right now, what they are relying on is for us to feel discouraged, feel overwhelmed, feel hopeless. And that's where they get into the cracks, and that's how they operate. So let's not give them that. Let them know that we are willing and we will fight to the very bitter end and then beyond, because we are each and every one of us worth that. So thank you, Senator Markey, and thank you all so much for being here today.
Thank you. Thank you to you for your great work over in the House of Representatives. They only got this thing passed by 1 vote. That's how narrow it is. This is so close that history is going to be determined by a small handful of votes now in the Senate, and we're going to try to reduce the pain which was inflicted by the House bill, then send it back over to the House. They had a hard enough time just with 1 vote. We can kill this bill. So we just need people to stand up and to fight, and that's what Congresswoman Lee did with all of her allies in the House, and now we get a chance to do the same thing right now. This thing is just so super close, and the more that we educate, the more that we don't agonize, but organize, is the more likely that we're going to be in ultimately being successful. So our first speaker is going to be Ann Shout, who is the Senior Advisor for Strategy, Planning, and Projects for Protect Our Care. So welcome, Ann. Thank you so much for all of your great work.
Thank you so much for having me today. And thank you, Senator Markey. Thank you so much for your leadership and for helping us spread the word on this devastating bill. And we really appreciate you're always on the front lines of these fights. And I have to say to Representative Lee, I grew up just outside of her district. I'm just on the outside. So it's an honor to be here with her as well. She's been such a great ally to our state team in Pennsylvania. And just like Senator Markey, has been working to ensure that everybody has healthcare that they need to thrive. But let's talk about this big, ugly bill. I'm going to go over some of the healthcare aspects of this bill, what's in it and who's hurt by it. And really, this bill is so deeply unpopular. We just need people to know what's in it, and they don't like it. But the Republican agenda here is clear. They want to raise costs on hardworking families and rip coverage away from millions. And if they're successful in making the largest cuts to healthcare in history, 16 million people will lose coverage. And that's in the bill in its current state that just passed the House. And this is all to fund tax breaks for billionaires and big corporations. And these Republican attacks on our healthcare are as extreme as they are unpopular. And so that's why we must do everything we can to stop this from going into effect. Because no one should lose access to life-saving care and coverage just so the ultra-rich can pay less in taxes. So now that this spending bill is working its way through the Senate, Republican senators will have to prove where they stand. Do they stand with billionaires or they stand with everyday Americans? And so it's our job to hold them accountable on that. So you can see from this slide, where does this number come from? 16 million Americans will lose coverage. So the Democrats in Congress, they asked this, the CBO, the Congressional Budget Office, take a look at all the healthcare elements that are in this proposal, that are left out of this proposal. How do they all work together? And what will be the impact of that? And so this is the new number that they came out with, 16 million. So it's great that we have this number, that we, that we can, use to pressure these Republicans and make it clear that yes, people will lose coverage, people will be harmed, 16 million Americans. Of course, this number could change as it works its way through the House, but we'll be continuing to follow along. So that's nearly 8 million people who due to Medicaid, millions more due to various cuts in ACA coverage. And that's because of this bill doesn't have the tax credits that make premiums more affordable to middle-class families. And so that means that they would be eliminated. And then also different changes to the marketplace rules that would add another couple million people. So when you add all it together and do all the interactions, it's 16 million people. But let's talk about Medicaid. So that's on the next slide. So this is the biggest cut to Medicaid in history. And, what is Medicaid? Medicaid is our largest healthcare provider in this country, and it provides care to more than 70 million Americans. And you may know that it was expanded as part of the ACA, and some states, it was a big fight, but some states expanded Medicaid, some states didn't. But from that, there's been a lot of research about how beneficial Medicaid is to people. And you can see study after study show all these important outcomes, positive outcomes that these states, that especially the states that expanded Medicaid have seen due to just having more people covered and how that improves their lives. So that's why these cuts are so devastating, because we would just roll all of that backwards. So not only would hardworking families lose coverage and access to care, but this would impact rural hospitals could shut down and close. Seniors, yes, seniors, because, this is Representative Lee got into this, a very important story about this, but, seniors, we think of seniors in Medicare, but a lot of seniors use Medicaid for coverage for at-home care, nursing homes. Children, people fighting cancer and addiction, veterans, people with serious disabilities, could all be kicked off their care, including caregivers, people who are on Medicaid who might take care of an elderly parent or a child or their children, or maybe a family member with a disability. So those are the type of people who are on Medicare and who are at the most risk here. And can we go to the next slide? Is going to be about the Affordable Care Act. So, I think we all probably remember the fight that Senator Markey was in to save the ACA repeal. This happened during Donald Trump's first presidency in 2017. My organization was actually started to protect the Affordable Care Act from repeal. So, you know, that was a huge fight, and all the advocates got together and pressured their members of Congress, and were at the Capitol. There were a ton of protests, and we were able to save the bill. And that was a huge deal. But many people don't know that this bill is basically ACA repeal by another name. It really, millions of people would lose coverage, you know, and there are really millions of people who rely on the ACA for quality, affordable healthcare. And this bill, what it would do is undermine key parts of the ACA through massive funding cuts, new rules and restrictions, and the elimination of the premium tax credits, as I was saying before, for people who purchase insurance on their own. And all of these increased costs and all of this would increase costs and kind of rip coverage away from middle and low income families. So I think this is going under the radar. It's getting a little bit more coverage, but this is really serious. It is basically ACA repeal. So the next slide. So who feels the effects of this? You know, it's not just people on Medicaid or people who purchase insurance on their own through the ACA marketplaces. This bill will drive up costs for everyone. Because of course, when we're ripping healthcare away from people who need it the most, it means that the cost of uncompensated care will skyrocket. People aren't going to see their doctors because they don't have insurance. They kind of wait for things to get to a crisis moment. They go to the hospital. Those things aren't, then they're not covered. That care isn't covered. And so that cost is pushed onto all of us. And it also means that hospitals have to cut back on services. They might not provide maternity care, or they may have to shut down entirely. And so this is a really big problem, especially for rural areas where, you know, people are already traveling long distances to get their care. And so if your hospital shuts down, you're traveling hours and hours to get the care that you need. And it really is life and death for some people. So on the next slide, we're going to talk a little bit about what are the Republicans saying. So, you know, you're hearing a lot, I'm sure, about waste, fraud, and abuse and work requirements. You know, obviously, these are their talking points, but just know that they know that their actual position is deeply unpopular with the American people. And so this is kind of what they're clinging to. But there is not enough waste, fraud, and abuse in the system. The system is actually works pretty efficiently for us to get the, you know, all of this hundreds of billions that they're trying to cut from the system. And work requirements, you know, it's just putting miles of red tape on working families who are trying to access care. And it's intentional. They're putting these work requirements on so that they can generate savings by kicking people off care. Why do work requirements save money? It's because it kicks eligible people off coverage. We've seen it happen in states that already implemented work requirements, like in Arkansas and in Georgia, that it really just kicks eligible people off coverage. And this isn't even a problem, okay? Most people on Medicaid who can work already do work. There's a lot of working folks who don't get coverage through their employer who use Medicaid. And then there are a lot of seniors and children and people in school and people with disabilities who are unable to work, or maybe the caregivers that we talked about, that you're taking care of your kids or a family member. And so that's why you're not working. So you would constantly have to be, you know, proving that you're eligible for the care, and then you just end up getting kicked off in the process. We've seen it happen. So it's just a way to kick people off coverage. But that being said, I don't think that we should talk too much. You know, my colleagues and partners in different organizations, we've done a lot of polling on this. It's actually their work requirement arguments and waste, fraud, and abuse arguments aren't that strong of arguments. So we shouldn't be kind of playing in this area with them. I think it only benefits them if we're talking about a lot. We should really just be hammering our own point home, because just know that their work requirement is arguments are kind of their best arguments, and it's not even really breaking through. The American people are with us. They're not with them across the spectrum. But you'll hear more about that later. So the next slide, what are we saying? while people are struggling to pay their bills, this Republican spending bill will raise the cost of healthcare and take away healthcare from millions of people who count on it, and give massive tax breaks to billionaires and big corporations. So, as Representative Lee was saying, like, members of Congress need to hear from you. They're hoping that these cuts will fly under the radar, and there's more cuts. They're talking about doing more under Medicare. So we're really going to be following this along and trying to see where this thing ends up. But it's important that they hear from you, because there's still time to do the right thing. But they need to know that if they make these cuts, that we will hold them accountable, because this is a life and death issue for so many Americans. This is at a time when people are struggling to afford the cost of care and facing economic uncertainty. And, we shouldn't be raising costs on people, because not $1 should be taken away and taken out of our healthcare system to fund these tax breaks for billionaires and big corporations. So you can learn more at our website, which is linked there. And again, thank you so much for having me. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Senator Markey. Thank you.
So much great. That was a great presentation. Very much appreciate that. And we're getting the information, the tools which we need in order to be effective. So, and again, we know these cuts are going to be devastating. We know who's going to be harmed, the most vulnerable. And next, we're going to hear from Salam Bhatti, who is the SNAP director for the Food Research and Action Center. So welcome, Salam.
Thank you, Senator. And in case you recognize the background, I think we're just a few walls away.
Oh, beautiful.
So come on in, let's make a cameo. I'm going to share a presentation today to go over the SNAP cuts. And this is part of a series I like to do called, you can hit the next, it's called What Do You Mean? The next again, What Do You Mean? So we're going to have a little dark humor fun as we go through some really hard topics to talk about. So let's go to the first slide. And the first point here is reconciliation. This is the word of the summer. A lot of people might not be familiar with this term. You might have heard it a lot. What's going on is that the House passed a bill. Now the Senate is currently looking at how they're going to have their own budget go out. They're going to send that back to the House, and then it could essentially be like a ping pong summer. But that is reconciliation. And so we are working to fight against the cuts in this budget that the House put forward. We want to make sure the Senate doesn't put forward any of the cuts that have been mentioned regarding SNAP in that House budget. So we want to, push forward on this advocacy. So let's go to the next slide, which should be our first meme. What happened was the House majority, they passed a bill, and that cuts over $1 trillion from basic needs: Medicaid, SNAP, Medicare. And then their chatter that's going on entertainment channels like Fox and Friends is they keep talking about former President Biden. The analysis that's coming out is that former President Biden's name is getting mentioned 30 times, while Medicaid is getting mentioned once. SNAP is barely getting mentioned at all. And this is concerning because over 80% of voters, a few months ago, this polling was done, over 80% of voters did not support any cuts to these basic needs programs. Meanwhile, over 50% of likely voters don't know what's in the budget bill. So this is very concerning because people are not getting the messaging of what is in this budget bill. So we really need to be hammering these points to anybody, everybody who will listen. Talk to your family, talk to your friends, talk to people on the other side of the aisle, especially so they know what's in this bill, because once they find out, they will not support it. So next slide. Top line is, just like we heard from Medicaid, this is the deepest cut in SNAP's history, approximately $300 billion, which is about 30% of the budget. Now, some people might think, oh yeah, SNAP should get cut. And they think, oh, it's going to be a bureaucratic cut. It'll be an administrative cut. But there is not $300 billion of paper that can no longer be printed. Some people even think that the cuts will lead to increased benefits because it's administrative cuts and they'll save the money and they'll use it to increase benefits. But that's not the case either. This proposal will also, if it goes through, radically restructure the program, leading to even more cuts, which we'll talk about as well. And ultimately what it will do is take food assistance away from children, from households with older adults, people with disabilities, and really reduce the purchasing power of the SNAP benefits over the next decade. Let's go to the next slide. So there's a part called, there's something called an unfunded mandate. What the House bill proposes is forcing the states to do things and not providing any funding for it. So it's an unfunded mandate. And one of the ways they're proposing to do that is through the SNAP benefit. Right now, the SNAP benefit is fully federally funded. 100% of that SNAP benefit money is coming from the federal government. Now, what the House bill proposes is a cost shift. And they say the states should take on at least 5% of the cost of the benefits. And you might think, if you're not familiar with state budgets, you might think, oh, 5%, that's not a big deal. But it is a big deal. And we'll go into that just in a little bit. But I said at least 5% because they're trying to base this on a wonky thing known as payment errors. If your state has higher payment errors, it's going to increase up to 25% of a cost shift for the cost of the benefit. So let's talk numbers. Let's see what this actually looks like. Let's go to the first point. So hypothetical, I'm from Richmond, Virginia. In case anybody's from Richmond, Virginia, let's hang out at some point. But the first hypothetical is about Virginia. Let's go to the next point. Virginia had a 9.86% error rate in 2023. That's the most recent one. And I want to really clarify here because I have seen conflation happening within Republican talking points that this is conflated or combined with fraud. The error rate is not fraud at all. These are just genuine mistakes, nothing malicious about it. SNAP is a very complicated formula, and unfortunately, they're seeking to make it even more complicated. So states have error rates, and 9.86%, you might say, oh, that's a relatively low error rate. But go to the next point, and you'll see that under the House budget proposal, it actually places them in the second highest cut category, that cost shift of 20%. Huge. So what does that look like? Let's go to the next point. In fiscal year 2024, Virginians received over $1.76 billion in SNAP benefits. So if you've already done the math, great. That means you're probably not a lawyer like me. This is why I went to law school. I had to calculate this. Go to the next point. And it would cost Virginia's state budget $353 million had this existed in the past. So Virginia operates on a 2-year budget cycle, and that would mean $700 million they'd have to figure out spending for. And Virginia does not have that money. Similarly, I ran the numbers for Massachusetts as well. And oddly, Massachusetts has the same payment error rate, 9.86%. And in 2024, Massachusetts residents who participate in SNAP received over $2.6 billion. So again, the 20% cut would apply to them because it's that same error rate. That would be $522 million that the Massachusetts state budget would have to figure out and fund SNAP. So that's what we're looking at. No state is going to be able to afford this cost shift. So let's go to the next slide. The next unfunded mandate is regarding administrative costs. So this is another way that the federal government provides some funding for this, and this is for the administration of SNAP in the state. So you have SNAP administering agencies that hire folks, and they're the ones who are the eligibility workers and all that. The federal government provides 50% of the funding for that, and the state makes up the rest. So what the House bill proposes, let's go to the first 2 points. So right now it's a 50-50. The House proposes shifting that. 75% to come from the state budget, 25% to come from the federal budget. So what does that look like? Let's go to the next point. In 2023, the state admin costs in Virginia it was roughly equal, 174 million from Virginia, 175 from the federal government. But if this 75-25 happened, let's see what that would look like. Next point. It would cost Virginia an additional $87 million in addition to $174 million. So ultimately, over a 2-year budget cycle, that's close to $1 billion for the SNAP program. I also ran the numbers for Massachusetts. Massachusetts, the 50-50 split was by 85 million from the state, 83 million from the federal government, meaning an extra $41.5 million that the state would have to put in. That would make it a total of $126.5 million for the state, meaning over $1 billion in a 2-year budget. So something Massachusetts does not have the money for, Virginia does not have the money for, no state across the country is going to be able to afford this. So what does this mean? Let's check out the next slide. The shockwave. This is not a ripple effect. There's no butterfly effect here. It is a shockwave that will hit everything. And let's go to the first point. It's an impact on broad-based categorical eligibility. This is colloquially known as SNAP expansion. And when states adopt broad-based categorical eligibility, then tens of thousands or thousands of people who are in need are newly eligible for the SNAP program, and they end up signing up and participating. What states would have to do if these cuts go through are, they only have really three options. One is taking money from other programs and shifting it over to SNAP, which isn't going to happen because everything's underfunded anyways. The second thing is to increase taxes, which is never going to happen, not even during a good economy. And then the third thing is to start rolling back that categorical eligibility, rolling back that SNAP expansion, which is a goal of Project 2025. So the devil is in the details, and the devil is strong here. So they would roll back Project 2020. They would roll back CAT-L, and the elimination of CAT-L is a Project 2025 goal. So if families start getting removed from the program, let's go to the second point to see the impact here. It's an impact on school meals. Now, there's some rhetoric, there's some chatter coming out that says, oh, don't worry, children are not going to be impacted by this. But there is an impact, because if a child is removed from SNAP, then they lose their direct certification. They lose their automatic eligibility, their automatic application for free school meals. And now they're relegated to having to do their online application, which a lot of states, a lot of schools have moved over to online applications, or doing the paper-based application. And you already know that there's already going to be a lot of loss of coverage for those families, because a lot of households with low income don't have internet access. A lot of times parents in any economic class, they don't fill out the paperwork, or the paperwork might get lost, might get crumbled, and might get thrown out. So a lot of children will suffer as a result of this proposal, should it go through. So when people say it's not going to do anything to impact children, it will. Next slide. So what does this mean? You know, people keep talking about waste, fraud, and abuse, but let's see who this really is. It's an attempt to eliminate the programs, because one of the, we're talking about like upwards of $290 billion in cuts. It could be even more. And the Congressional Budget Office has said recently, and just a couple of weeks ago, that this could become so expensive for the states that they may pull out of the program entirely. That would be a shockwave. You know, food insecurity has increased 3 years in a row. USDA is reporting that grocery prices are going to increase faster this year than ever before. And what is Congress lining up to do? Cut the very program that solves for hunger in this country, that helps over 40 million people put food on the table every single month. And that is just something absolutely unacceptable. Let's go to the next slide, because unfortunately, wait, there's more. Let's go to the first point here. There's some other deep cuts. I'm glad to hear from the Medicaid presentation that, work requirements, we call them time limits, because essentially you're putting time limit on a basic human right of food, that they're unpopular. And what we're seeing from these cuts that are being proposed are two different time limit expansions. One is to expand the upper age limit from, I believe it's 54 to 65, or 55 to 65. So what that means is you're going to see a lot more people lose SNAP benefits. It's going to be a cut. It's not a savings, it's a cut. And the CBO, the Congressional Budget Office, scored this and said upwards of 3 million people would lose benefits. Not because they found a job, but because they couldn't find a job. You've got age discrimination happening, you've got outdated skill sets, you've got health issues that don't rise to a full disability, you've got a lack of jobs available ultimately as well. So this is one thing that could happen should these go through. And the second thing is an impact on single parents. Right now, if you have a child under 18, that's considered a dependent. And so you are exempt from the able-bodied adults with dependents work requirement, or that time limit that's associated with them. And that time limit is you can only get SNAP benefits for 3 months out of a 36-month period. If none of that makes sense, it's not designed to make sense. It's not scientific. It's not mathematically created by the rules of the universe. It's all cruel policy that we don't need at all. And all the studies show that work requirements don't work. So what they actually do is remove people from the program. Now, if you're thinking about single parents in this context, if their child is over 7, what we're hearing is, the child is in school, so the parent has time to work. But we all know that's not the case. Try finding a job that's going to give you 20 hours consistently a week, so you get 80 hours a month, and having that happen throughout the whole year. When kids have summer breaks, winter breaks, they get sick, and then you have to call off work all of a sudden, and will you get paid time off? Will that ding you for your hours that you have to report in for these time limit requirements? So there's so much at stake here. These are not things to encourage hard work. They are to encourage paperwork, which will remove people from the program. And what will ultimately happen is if you're a single mom or a single dad with 2 kids, your household of 3, the benefits that go in for a household of 3 mean if you're not meeting those work requirements, you will be removed, and it will be benefits for a household of 2. So now you have to make even fewer dollars stretch even further. So it's going to have an egregious impact on food insecurity in this whole country. There's also some other wonkier things about jobs and stuff, and that's really, again, designed to cut people from the program. That's ultimately what's going to happen here. And lastly, the last cut we'll talk about is the next point, Thrifty Food Plan. This was, if you were involved in the Farm Bill advocacy last year, you may remember the Thrifty Food Plan. This is something that is the SNAP benefit is based from. So the average SNAP benefit is about $6.16 per person per day. That only increased in 2021 as a result of the previous Farm Bill in 2018, in which it said, we're going to look at the Thrifty Food Plan and adjust it for the current times. Because up until then, it was an outdated formula. So now it takes into context current dietary guidelines. What are people buying? What are people's consumption patterns? What food is available in the markets? So that's what it does. And so before 2021, the average daily benefit per person was about $4.80. So that step in the right direction of $6.16 is great, but it's still not adequate enough. We still have room to grow. But what this bill does is it will freeze the Thrifty Food Plan, and that will result in the purchasing power of the SNAP benefit going down over the next decade. It would also freeze summer EBT or Sunbucks, depending on what state you're from, which impacts children again. So let's go to the next slide. So the House proposes that $290 billion cut, and everybody's like, all right, no, wait, we're going to go to the Senate, and the Senate's going to solve everything. But what we're seeing so far coming out of the Senate is paring down these cuts. It's like, maybe not a 15% administrative cost shift. Maybe we'll do a 5% or benefit cost shift this way. But none of this needs to happen is the point. We don't need any of the money being taken from the folks who need it and being shifted to those who are the wealthiest in human history. None of these cuts have to happen. And so we will continue beating down on the drum that don't pass any of it. You can just block it the whole way through. So we're waiting for the SNAP cuts, or rather the SNAP bill from the side of things, the SNAP budget from the Senate side of things, and we'll be pushing back against any and all cuts that may be present in it. Next slide, or if that's the last slide. That's it. Happy to take on any questions as they come in the chat. So thank you so much, Senator Markey, not just for the time here, but also for your space.
I think everyone who has joined us tonight, they feel like they're getting the single best presentations that anyone has seen. I wish that we could put you guys up on national television in prime time so that everyone can understand the implications of this bill, because that was fabulous. What the first 2 presentations, does everyone agree with me? Just absolutely great. And thank you so much. And by the way, my office never looked better. Maybe I should be doing what I'm doing. I'm over in my hideaway across the street underneath the Capitol Dome, so I can be making the roll calls. But I think my office looks better right there, right where you were. So again, just fabulous job, just a great job. And again, they want to get all this passed by the 4th of July, so we got to telescope the time frame to work in order to defeat it. And up next, Zab Martinez from AFSCME Council 32. And we welcome you, Zab, and looking forward to your presentation as well.
Hi, my name is Zabdiel Martinez. You guys can call me Zab. and I'm an economic support specialist from Dane County over in Madison, Wisconsin. What I do is I help people connect with vital resources like food assistance and Medicaid. I want to start off by first thanking Senator Markey for, and everyone who is here today to discuss what's at stake for our communities for if Congress, guts these public services. Your support shows that the Americans stand against this harmful budget, and we need to now more than ever. I'm here today because I'm worried about how this bill is going to affect working people, but especially those who I serve every day in my community and people who rely on these programs like SNAP to put food on their table or Medicaid, to provide for their health care. And let's start off with calling what this budget what it is. It's a massive giveaway to billionaires at the expense of our futures. More than 15 million people can stand to lose their health care, and another 3.5 could lose food support. Also, billionaires can get more yachts. It's shameful. And as working and helping my community, I've seen the faces of the people that this bill is going to hurt. We may all know somebody who this bill was going to hurt. I think about that single mother who's trying to stretch every penny just to keep their lights on. They laid off workers who may need help just to get back on their feet. The retiree, who go to bed hungry because they can't afford their groceries. We should be strengthening these programs and that help them, not just gutting them. And as someone who administers these programs and these benefits, I can tell you that these Medicaid requirements are just another way for Congress to cut Medicaid, because most people in Medicaid are already working. They're often low-wage workers who are dedicated to their communities, working as educators, health aides at home, and in various other essential roles, but yet they can't afford insurance because companies have made it too expensive. What these new requirements really do is they add more red tape to the process, which will lead to coverage losses and burden the system by instead of making it more efficient. My fear is that those who are already struggling, like the elderly, disabled, or those with just limited access to technology, can be disenrolled or will be disenrolled simply because they missed one deadline. Many of these workers earn poverty level wages, and with a full-time job, health insurance can be out of reach. Meanwhile, others may recently have just lost their job, and the health insurance that came with it, it's gone. Or they've become diagnosed with an illness, something like cancer, that requires a lifeline of support. Medicaid is that lifeline for them. And so if Congress slashes this funding, it will also hurt the state and local budgets, which we rely on, and we have seen for Medicaid and food assistance. Funding this program to help people. Without federal funding, states, cities, and towns will be forced to make even deeper cuts to public services that families depend on. In other words, this bill is a disaster. When people are told they no longer qualify or can't access these essential benefits, you can hear it in their voices. How are they going to afford food? How are they going to pay for their health care? It's plain wrong to cut these vital services and to cut those to the people who are in need for these services, all to provide tax breaks to billionaires. We can't let this bill pass. I urge you to speak to your senators and demand that they stand with working families and not the billionaires. This fight's not over. We will keep telling our stories and let them know and let every senator know what's at stake. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That was a great job, Zap, and thank you for your daily work on this. I mean, time is of the essence. We don't have a lot of time. We can win, but only if we get our energy level to the highest level and get the facts into the hands of people all across the country, so that they can talk to their senators. So just absolutely imperative. Next, we're going to hear from Michael Linden, Executive Director of Families Over Billionaires. Welcome, Michael.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Senator. Thank you, Senator Markey, for having me on this important call. My name is Michael Linden. I am the Director of Families Over Billionaires. We are a campaign entirely dedicated to elevating the voices of everyday Americans the vast majority of whom oppose cutting Medicaid and food stamps to pay for tax cuts for rich people and corporations. Now, I know that you all heard this, and everybody who spoke before me has done an incredible job of emphasizing that this bill is a scam that will make everyday Americans pay more so that rich people can pay less. And my fellow colleagues here have done an incredible job at underscoring the ways that it will make everyday people, especially people who are struggling, pay more for healthcare, for food, for basic needs. I'm going to focus on the second part of this, the way that this bill is incredibly skewed to the wealthy and delivers massive tax breaks to the very wealthy and corporations. So let's go to the next slide. And actually one more slide after that. Thank you. Okay, so the core of this bill on the tax side is a renewal of tax cuts that were passed originally in 2017 and that expire at the end of this year. Those tax cuts, which were called the Trump tax scam or the Trump tax law from 2017, were very skewed to people at the top. What you see on this chart here is the average tax cut, average tax change for households in the United States by income. So way on the right is the richest 0.1% of Americans, and they got an average tax cut of something like $280,000 a year. In the middle, the tax cuts were much smaller. They barely can see them on the graph. And at the bottom, the tax cuts were effectively zero. And in fact, about 50 million households got no tax cut at all or paid more in taxes under the original Trump tax law. Now, this is the core of what they are doing in this bill to taxes. They are reinstating all of these same tax cuts from 2017. And the reason that these tax cuts are so skewed to the wealthy is because they include provisions that basically only help very wealthy people. I'll give you a couple of very quick examples, and I won't go into too much detail, but there is a tax cut for the very top rate. So it used to be that people at the very top paid one rate, and then it comes down in the tax law. In this tax law, they also included a provision that would make it easier for rich people to take more deductions and more exemptions to lower their taxable income. That was a big benefit to wealthy people. And the things that helped ordinary Americans, everyday Americans, were kind of a give and a take. They got there were pieces that helped some people and others that hurt them. So that's where you end up with this very skewed picture on the graph. Now, the bad news is that this year's proposal is actually, if anything, even worse. If you go to the next slide, here's analysis of the tax proposals for this year's tax law, and you can see it is even worse. An even bigger tax cut for people at the very top. Still, the middle gets left out, and the bottom ends up paying actually a little bit more, according to the Joint Committee on Tax. The reason these proposals are even more skewed to the wealthy is because some of the things I just mentioned are expanded in this law, and so wealthy people get even more, whereas a lot of low-income people are completely left out. I'll give one quick example. The law includes an expansion of the child tax credit, except that it leaves out 20 million low-income people and expands it to people who are higher income. There are some proposals that you might have heard a little bit about, like removing taxation of tips or overtime. Those things are temporary, whereas the tax cuts for the rich and the corporations are permanent. And that is why you have this very, very skewed picture where the vast majority of the benefits go to people at the top of the income spectrum. People in the top 0.1% are households that make at least $4 million a year. They are the very last people that need a $290,000 tax cut. So that's what's in the tax bill. But let's step back for a minute. Next slide, please. And put this all together. What you heard about the provisions from healthcare, food assistance, and now the tax proposals. Let's put it all together and let's think about who wins and who loses, who's going to pay more and who's going to pay less. When you take healthcare away from 16 million people and you raise the cost of healthcare for millions more, when you take food assistance away from 3 million people and you raise the cost for millions more, when you raise energy costs for so many people and you cut taxes for the wealthy, who's going to pay more, who's going to pay less? This will not be a surprise to any of you. Next slide. Here's what it looks like all together. Next slide. Boom. People in the bottom 40% of Americans will pay more. Their incomes will go down because they will pay more for healthcare, they will pay more for energy costs, they will pay more for food. People at the top of the income spectrum will pay less. They will get a benefit. People in the bottom will pay more. This shouldn't be that surprising given what you've already learned about what's in the bill: cuts to healthcare, cuts to food assistance, tax cuts for the wealthy. But this is what happens. This analysis comes from a right-leaning institution called Penn Wharton, and this is what everybody has found. The Congressional Budget Office has found the same thing. At a very basic level, this bill takes money out of the pockets of most Americans to give tax cuts to people at the very top. That may sound like hyperbole, but that is exactly what they're doing. Now, that's not all. I want to say one other thing about this, and then I will hand it off. This bill spends roughly $4 trillion on tax cuts for the wealthy, and it cuts about $1.5 trillion of things like healthcare and food assistance. So where is the difference? Let's go to the next slide. The difference between those two numbers is an increase in the deficit, which means more borrowing. More borrowing. That's the way this happens. When tax cuts for the wealthy aren't free, that money has to come from somewhere. Some of that money is coming straight out of the pockets of low and middle income families who currently receive help for healthcare and food and other kinds of assistance. But some of it will just come from borrowing. But that borrowing is not free either. So let's just look at the math really quickly. Next slide. $4 trillion in spending essentially on tax cuts, about $1.2 trillion in cuts to spending on healthcare and food, and then the borrowing that is required to make up the difference will add another $500 billion in interest costs for a total increase in debt of $3 trillion just over the first 10 years. Some estimates have it at 10 times that over the next 20 or 30 years. So this is a huge amount of debt. And let's be very clear, this has direct impacts on the things that we all care about, because Republicans in Congress are right now saying that we do not have enough money to pay for things like basic health care and food assistance because the deficit is too high. When they increase the deficit by cutting taxes, they are going to turn around and do that again in just a couple of years, or maybe even next year. They're going to say, we don't have the money. They've been cutting taxes repeatedly for 25 years, mostly for wealthy people, and now they say there's not enough money to make sure that everyday Americans have basic health care and food assistance. So there are also additional fiscal risks that come from higher debt. That could include things like your mortgage might cost more, your auto loans might cost more, but most directly, they are going to use this as a reason not to invest in the everyday Americans who are the actual engines of our economic future. And with that, I will turn it back to the senator.
That was great, Michael. Honestly, this is so much news you can use. It's just absolutely amazing. I'm feeling so much smarter than I did an hour ago. Every one of the presentations is fantastic, but that economic scam that they're trying to pull, Michael, that was just a great job in laying that out. And now we're gonna have the concluding speaker, and it's from the Center for American Progress, Joe Radosevich. Hey, Joe.
You got it. Thank you for having me.
Radosevich.
there's disagreement in the family, so you've got plenty of company, one way or another. Depends.
So give me another pronunciation, Joe.
Radosevic is
Oh,
what my family says. It's Croatian. But if you go back to Croatia, they'll say Radosevic. So it's all good.
and that's where you decide. You decide to be the actual Croatian pronunciation, huh?
Yes, yes.
So ladies and gentlemen, yeah. So we're gonna finish up with Joe and the Center for American Progress, which was put together to be kind of the counterpart to what the whole Reagan era had put together. So we would have our own think tank out there too. And Joe was counselor there at the Center for American Progress. So thank you, Joe. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for helping put this space together. Thank you for having me, and for everyone who was on. I'm happy to be batting cleanup here. We've done a lot of learning about the bill, and my role here really is to kind of encourage you. The biggest takeaway here is there's no wrong way to fight this bill. You can go to the next slide. Speaking out right now has had a huge impact, and we should be, really feeling confident about that. This Republican Congress, this president is not popular, and advocacy really is having an impact. Summer Lee, Representative Lee, spoke a little bit at the beginning about how this is a live issue right now, and there is a movement right from the right to make people think like their voice doesn't matter, the oldest trick in the book for sort of reactionary folks. And it's just not true. Today we got news that their timeline might be slipping. We got news that some of the clean energy credits might be changing. This is a live issue. And the more that people feel the pressure, including in the House, in the Senate, the more likely it is they're going to say behind closed doors, this goes too far, or I can't do this piece. And even if we can't defeat every piece, we are going to improve the lives of other people and other Americans who depend on programs with every little change. We can go to the next slide. This betrayal that they have planned is really the tip of the spear in taking these folks down another notch. And the next month is crucial to doing that. You've got the information now. You have, the policy, you have the data. If there's something in there that really speaks to you, or maybe that you have a connection to, someone in your family might have relied on one of these programs. You may rely on a program right now. Lead with that. You don't have to think about, what's the exact right set of words to say. You can go to the next slide. And this key, to taking on the other side, we did a lot of data here. But stories are how people remember things. It's how we make sense of the world around us. It's hard to sometimes remember X, million people or Y, dollar amount. It's very easy to remember a story. And, the big story, I think, coming out of this whole teach-in is all the things they are willing to do, right, to reward the very wealthy, all the people they're willing to hurt. And so, we know from social science, and we know from Aristotle, like the persuasive way to communicate is to give people a story that they can remember. So think about your own background, your family's background, when you are communicating about the bill. Connect some of these data points. Pick your favorite one to some story that is easy for people to repeat. Next slide. Here's the data that shows why what I'm saying makes sense. This survey done actually by Michael's group. We're all working, together very closely. And the chart at the top just shows the number of Americans who said they've heard a lot about the bill. That's that orange part. And there was a follow-up question for those folks, and they said, okay, you've heard a lot about it. What do you think about it? And 60% say they don't like it. They hate it. And so to know this bill is to really hate this bill. And go to the next slide. When we gave a very neutral description of what it does, just the facts, ma'am, the reaction for people who hadn't heard much about the bill was the same as people who had heard about it. So this wasn't an example of people who were like really closely following the news, kind of reacting differently than other Americans. If you hear about this basic description, which includes the stuff Republicans are happy to talk about, border security, whatever, it's still underwater by 22 points. And so I think as advocates, everyone on this call, you can have a lot of confidence that just looking this up kind of anywhere is going to move people against what's happening. And I think that that can really empower you to think about all the ways to engage. Last slide, as I kind of close this out, gives you some ideas. We said this at the top. This is a really crucial month. They're going to be, figuring this last pieces out in the Senate. It's going to have to go back over to the House. There are really opportunities to engage here and take what you want. No Kings, a series of protests that are coming up this weekend. If you want to be with people to sort of show collective power, that's a great place to go. You can go to a platform like Mobilize or We the People Dissent, which lists tons of different protests. If that's not your thing, you're more introverted, that's totally fine. You can comment. Really, it's not above us. Like, folks on the right do this a lot. You can comment on news, you can go to message boards, you can engage with people. The biggest thing is just to use your voice. Pick up the phone, call members of Congress. It's also an easy ask to make of a family member, maybe easier than going to a protest, that's a good one. Maybe easier than calling into a radio show. Pick up the phone and calling a member of Congress is an easier step for some folks. Also, there's a reason 4th of July parades have a lot of politics in them. We're all hanging around together. If you have a place that you regularly go, make a homemade sign, right? The biggest piece that we have to deal with over the next month is just to make people think just for a half a moment, because this isn't some complicated argument against this bill. It's just that attention. And then, a radio show, a letter to the editor, even sending a postcard or letter to your own holiday list. Think creatively. There are not, any bad answers right now, because across the spectrum, people oppose this thing. You aren't going to be making a mistake in the ways that you reach out. So that's my kind of call to action at this right now. This thing is on thin ice. And I think every single piece that we push on means something might get dropped, something might get changed. And those are going to be kids that are maybe getting a meal. It's going to be someone who's disabled who is getting wraparound services or care that otherwise would not be happening. And right now, we are making a ton of progress, and the stage is set to really deliver a really tough blow to what they're trying to do just over the beginning of the summer here. So with that, I think I want to thank everyone for coming. I think the senator has perhaps a vote to get to, but this is a great space, and all the organizations who are presenting here have additional material, data, stories, memes that you can use to make this case, and there's no wrong way to make it. So thank you.